Hey witches, it's Lee and this is Do the Magical Thing. Let's have a little chat about ego, shall we? I've got my toad t-shirt on to emphasise the grand toad part of the title of the video, and it refers to, and some of you will know this already, so forgive me, but it refers to my magical nickname, and it's meant very reverently. It's not meant to be taken seriously at all. I'm just going to say that off the bat because it started as a joke about the lack of critical thinking within the witchcraft community. I was talking with some buddies and we were talking about, you know, with the situations that I've seen on certain conversations online. I could call myself the Grand Toad and sell croaking lessons and someone would buy it. And, you know, it's meant flippantly, it was meant as a joke, but it's kind of dismissive really of people who perhaps been taken up by these egos within witchcraft, who present themselves as something they're not. But, you know, the name stuck, it became a bit of a running joke, and it's something that really kind of reminds me to stay humble and reminds me to not get this kind of inflation of ego and sort of delude myself in terms of my, you know, position within the witchcraft community. I know I'm very privileged to have the access to talk with you and to have the access to the material that I do, but that doesn't make me any better than anybody else within the witchcraft community. I always think that knowledge should be shared, and I'm very keen on that. And I think the thing is, with witchcraft, it's unregulated, isn't it, right? There's no central authority, and so we don't have this kind of this thing we can go to be like, oh yeah, well that ticks off these boxes, so that means that this is correct or this is accurate information or whatever it is. I feel like there are some things we can do to help us out, which I'll talk about a little later on in our magical thing to do at the end of the video. Now, in this sort of soup, this witchy soup, if you like, and we're trying to get like, what flavour is this? What ingredient is this? Is this what everyone's just sort of shouting words at me? We have this kind of cult of personality that rises up, yeah? And the thing is, significance is subjective, right? And positions in traditions only really mean something within that tradition as such, yeah? And this goes for any kind of religion, really, you know. But if you're a high priestess or a high priest or a high priestess, or whatever your position might be, whatever your authority you might have, it's very limited to within what you actually influence, right? It doesn't mean you get to say to all witches, to all practitioners, you know, this is how it is, this is what goes, and I have authority on this. I had somebody turn up to a moot that I helped organise, and they said, oh, I'm here, right? Bear in mind, they weren't in, but we had a bit of a challenge with them, myself and the other organiser, because they'd had their ego bruised a little bit by us wanting to put this event on in a local space where they also held events. But bear in mind, this is a big city that we were looking to hold it in, and it was our first event. We were by no means a threat or anything like that, but their ego kind of took it that way. And we had a bit of an exchange. I invited them in to join us if they wanted to, and they turned up. Now, for me, after the exchange that we had, I wouldn't have turned up personally, because I would have been like, I've been a bit of a dick, I'm not going to show up to these people's events. But they did, and as I invited them in, and then they started positioning themselves. Literally, they said, I'm here as a resource. No, you're not. You're here as a guest, right? You're here as a guest. You might have a certain amount of information, a certain amount of experience, but you're here as a guest primarily, and no one's asked you for this. By positioning themselves as that, maybe they thought they were kind of giving some kind of exchange there, but what they were really doing was kind of putting themselves forward apart from the community, apart from the rest of the group. And for me, that's just not, it's not my bag, right? Maybe I have some things that you don't know, you have things that I don't know, right? Anyway, that all happened. So the challenge is they saw themselves, because they were in a certain federation, because they were doing certain things, they saw themselves as this kind of position, right? And I think it's made me sort of step back really from the local community in a way, because it was just such a unpleasant experience to sort of have this, you know, trying to be nice, having this person be willfully twisting things, you know, as ego does. Ego is fragile, and we'll talk about that coming up soon. So positions and traditions, very subjective. Now that's local, right? And the other thing that occurred locally ish was that people were in a group, online group, who were looking for people to join their tradition. Now, they asked some kind of red flaggy questions for me. They were asking things like your occupation, your marital status, all this sort of stuff. And maybe that's something, I'm not part of covens myself. Maybe that's the norm. But to me, it kind of feels a little bit like, why do you need to know this? They were saying if you want to join, then you have to give us all this information and you have to write this statement. And it's like, I'm not applying for a loan necessarily. As much as I can appreciate you want to know that people are serious, I thought, right, let's ask a couple of questions in return. This is an exchange, hopefully. And so I asked, what can you offer people who are coming to you? Talking about what people will get from you, what you want from other people, but what about the exchange there? And I said, what about your stance on queer folks? Because that's always a question. If you ever want to check what kind of figure, ego, or expression of ego a person is, you can ask the queer question. And they initially were like, I'm guessing you're not serious about this, so I'm not going to answer your questions. Big red flag, right? So there's that. And then they started to equate in the exchange. I was like, this is disappointing, because do you not have, am I to presume you don't have anything to offer? Like, come on, I was a bit cheeky, I'm not going to lie. But I was like, what is it that you are going to give other people? And why is it so difficult to answer the queer question of, are queer people welcome in your group? And then they did the typical thing of equating queerness with sex and saying that, I don't know what sex has to do with anything. We don't have that. And it's like, hang on, I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about queerness. That's a different thing, right? That's a different thing. And so, immediately showed a very archaic view. And I get not everyone's going to have the kind of awareness necessarily, but for other queer folks in that online space, they had at least that buffer between this kind of ego that wouldn't necessarily want to exchange and express themselves in a way that was kind of dual, right? It was this process of quid pro quo. And I think the challenge is sometimes with covens, they have this kind of thing of like, especially in traditional sort of practices, of this secrecy. And whilst I can understand that some mysteries, are things that people have to experience, I don't know whether the secrecy thing is for me. I understand the need for it necessarily when it was first about, when it was a very, as Ronald Hutton puts it, kind of an avant-garde practice, a practice that was very much against the cultural norms of the time, and I think the thing is it's difficult, right? Because there's this kind of oath-bound thing, there are things we just will never know about what happens in a coven. And there was an interesting video by a Wiccan practitioner who was saying about consent being key when it comes to initiation and things like that. For me, I don't know. I don't know whether I would ever be comfortable not knowing what's coming up. And I also think that information and experience are two different things, and that we can give information, but experiencing it ourselves sometimes comes a little later, and that's okay. I mean, look at how we exchange with our fellow people, right? Or look at how we exchange with a kid who's getting too close to the fire, is the old adage, isn't it? And you go, don't touch the fire because you're going to burn yourself. And then the kid has to burn themselves to know, oh shit, that's hot, right? It doesn't matter how many times you tell them. That's information and that's experience. And once you've got information and experience, you've got wisdom, yeah? And for me personally, I feel like an apprenticeship rather than a initiation is my way of going about it, because an apprenticeship suggests that everybody was learning at one point. It also suggests that you can progress. And the thing that the person who was the Wiccan practitioner, I wish I remember who they were now, was saying is that, these rituals and these initiations happen after a period of like trust and knowledge and learning and like a longer time. It's not like something that happens immediately. But for me as a queer person, for me as a fat person, for me as a person who is is existing in the world in a neurodiverse way, there are things I just wouldn't necessarily be comfortable with. And also I have to look after myself, right? Because I don't know whether everybody is going to have my best interests at heart through their own bigotry. So for me, having the ability to foster open communication and to be able to foster an answer to a question, to two very simple questions, is really key, right? And so the challenges this is in person. A lot of folks will say like, oh, online, and they'll talk about the problems online. Yeah, sure, we've got some challenges online, no lie, right? But in person, I've had challenges with ego. In person, I've had, these people who are not, who say to me, oh, it will be an exchange online saying, well, speak to more people from this place or speak to more people from that place. So I said, okay, speak, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm listening. And I had a conversation with somebody who ultimately couldn't necessarily say, they said, oh yeah, we are inclusive, but I can't tell you how we're inclusive because of the oath-bound side of things. For me as a curious person, but also a person keen on my safety, I don't know. I don't know if I can bolster the two. I would be fascinated to be part of, group ritual and group and a kind of dynamic that is something that is revealed over time. But at the same time, I'm not willing to risk my safety. And there's this kind of thing about like, oh, witchcraft isn't all sugar and cupcakes, right? I know that. Everyone, most fuckers know that, right? I get it. But at the same time, that's very easy for people of privilege to say when people who have to consider in their just walking down the street whether they can hold the hand of their partner or not, there's a different experience of life, right? There's a different experience. So this is veered slightly into queerness, but, ego, goodness, is there a greater ego than that of the cis white patriarchy? Do you know what I mean? I don't know. So, all said, traditions have their place, traditions have their own sort of things. There are progressive folks out there who are in these places who are open, who do communicate. This is not a blanket statement, but it's just some resistance and a little bit of honesty, really, because too often in our witchcraft groups we end up with, like I said, cult of personality, and we have these kind of public figures and, on social media to address, online. We do have this kind of, this sort of almost like Emperor's New Clothes thing going on, right? Where everyone's going, oh, look at that fabulous outfit, and the Emperor's naked, and you're like, hang on, the Emperor's naked, what are we all doing here? But the crowd's like, no, we must uphold this ego. And you're like, hang on, this is nonsense, like, what's going on here? Like, what, am I the only one seeing this? And so, we have these cults of personality that get sort of perpetuated as these great things within, online spaces, within, certain public figures who kind of become almost like you can't critique them, you can't have these honest conversations, you can't say anything, and that is, it's just, it's not okay. And the thing is, with the rise of, things like hashtags and things like, with the sort of thing of authors becoming content creators, or in fact the other way around often, of content creators becoming authors, just because, right, and there's that phrase, isn't there, everyone's got a book in them, right? Doesn't mean it's a good book, right? no, that's hard, perhaps harsh to say, but it's true. How many witchcraft books have you read? And out of all of those, how many have been actually decent and good and given you information and not been a regurgitation, all claimed that they're about witchcraft and then about a particular tradition within witchcraft, right? And you're like, hang on, I don't do that, but you're claiming this is all of witchcraft, but it's not. And Thorne Mooney actually has written a book called Witch's Path, which I found quite interesting, and I've challenged myself by reading something that's more, it is open to everybody really, but it's from a very much from a traditional Wiccan perspective, and it's been really interesting to hear their takes. I've been listening on an audiobook, and they talk about different. They're quite a good person to read, in fact, on on their takes of things. I don't always agree with everything they say, but nonetheless, interesting in terms of their analysis. And yeah, I just feel like sometimes people could say no to a book deal, couldn't they? Right, this is not formal. This is like general social media, general online. Just because you've got a few followers out there, whether that's 10,000 or whatever, million, who knows, right? It doesn't mean necessarily that you have something to say. I know that sounds funny because people spend a lot of time online, don't they, talking? But how often have you heard someone talking a lot without very much to say? I hope that's the case here. Right, I hope that's the case here. But yeah, there are authors though that are going to be good, are going to be things that are full of rich information, and normally it's because they're referencing, right? They're referencing. If you know what referencing is, it's they are using other information, sourcing it, and saying, right, here is where I got this information from, or so and so says this, and that's great. It's not saying that their opinion is the only opinion. Now, if they're, some people are at the point where they have to reference themselves. There are books and authors like Ronald Hutton, Owen Davis, Emma Wilby, who are trusted because of their academic rigour in their work, and because they tend to revisit things and they will, update. And this is a thing I've found since starting university is, and I always, beforehand, I used it myself because I knew if a book had, especially a witchcraft book, right? Because witchcraft books have a bibliography, right? A decent bibliography I'm talking about, not just a couple of websites, because the thing is, like blogs, academic blogs, things like that, or blogs written in a way that's very much sort of critical thinking, great. But if someone's bibliography consists of a couple of websites, it's not a strong bibliography, right? It's not something that is saying, these are the things I've read, this is the thing I'm referring to, and it's a bit of a red flag to me that this person has written a book and had so little in reference, or has done so little in terms of research. And this is not to be... The thing is, before, I had a bit of a sort of a bias. My dear wife is an academic, and I was a bit like, academics and university doesn't mean, you don't have to have university to do this and blah, 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 and you don't have to have university to think. But my goodness, university helps you to think. I'm talking as a mature student going into it. It really does help you to critique and understand things. And the main thing it gives you is confidence, because you can go, look, I know how to research this. I know how to back up my point. So if people come at you with like nonsense, you can go, that's just not true. That's just not accurate. And you can have a source, right? That doesn't mean that we need to make everyone have the labour of sourcing things. But when you're writing a fucking book, right, when you're putting something out into the witchy world, you need to have responsibility. That's part of the reason I take so fucking long to do some of these videos, and this one's been a long time coming, right, is because I'm constantly thinking, is this accurate? Is this fair? And I'm going to be wrong, as I always say, I'm going to be wrong, and that's great. If I'm disagreeing with myself in the future, that's a good thing. It means I've progressed, yeah? So I would just say, sourcing and referencing is not limited to academics. It's something that anybody can do, and they should do, right? You can look online at how to reference, and you'll have seen it. You'll have seen it in books already. You'll have seen it somewhere, or heard it somewhere, yeah? When we say quotes, right? When we say, I don't know, this and this and this, so-and-so said this, or as so-and-so says, right, that's referencing, that's quoting, yeah? Maybe you don't know the date it was written, but at least you're saying who wrote it or who said it, yeah? When we're quoting stuff. We do it all the time without thinking. But, book writing, it doesn't mean that you have this necessary authority. Althea Sebastiani, mentions this. They said, look, we can't keep deifying these... or along these lines, they say, you can't keep deifying people who write books, because it doesn't necessarily mean that they have any more authority over anybody else than someone who hasn't. And there's also, with Cassandra Snow mentions in their book Queer in Your Craft, that, let's have a little look. Yeah, the most successful witches out there aren't better, more skilled, more magical than you. They just had access, right? Isn't that interesting? They just had access. So people out there who write books, who create content, they aren't better witches than you necessarily. They just have more access, right? Someone who hasn't got a job and a degree and all this stuff is going to have more time to put videos out. Someone who hasn't got, a load of kids and, maybe they're a single parent, whatever it might be, or they've just got like a lot of pets, or they've got a lot of charity work they're doing, or they've got a lot of just life, right? Maybe they've got a lot of health challenges, right? And they're not able to do necessarily what everyone else can do. It doesn't mean they're not as good a witch, right? So yeah, back to ego specifically. Ego itself is, I like to picture it like a balloon, right? If we're kind of holding on to it like a little balloon, popping along, right, or bobbing along, right, and we're not being dragged by it, great. And being aware is one of the best ways to combat the issue of ego and its overinflation, right? So if we're aware of our inflation levels, that's great. We're not getting overinflated. And the thing is, when you have this kind of knowledge or any kind of thing that you're bobbing along with, others might be, seeking to attach their balloons to you or to a figure or to a practice or a pathway, right? There's the balloon that exists, that is the ego, that is the kind of the sort of formation, if you like, of that person, of that practice, and then there are everyone else's little balloons that they kind of try and attach on because maybe they're seeking significance or being close to power. They want some kind of surety, or they're worried about being excluded from the group if they don't agree, emperor's new clothes kind of thing, right? And then this balloon, right, it doesn't go from being one balloon, it becomes this mass of people pushing, and taking up space, and they're kind of taking up space that really should be shared, or they're kind of bundling over with what balloons like if you're dragging them along, like that, right? That's the technical word. And they're kind of bundling over voices that aren't always heard, right? The trouble is, if you're attaching your little ego balloon to this construct, to this person, it will rise and fall with it, yeah? It will rise and fall with it. And so what happens is that you might take kind of unhealthy measures to perpetuate this balloon, floating up, and any kind of pins aimed at this balloon of questions, perhaps, aimed at it, put you in a panic, and you suddenly go, because you can't separate yourself between the person or the idea or the ideology, right? But really, you should be able to stand on your own as a witch. One of the big things for me was, being having autonomy, right? Having autonomy, and I really was seeking that spiritually. I was seeking a kind of autonomy that let me make the decisions by choosing and filtering through, what information, I had. And the thing is, we can value our perspectives through a filter of self-awareness, right? And that leads to confidence, not arrogance. This is the thing, this is what we can get confused about when people are well informed, is that we confuse their sort of knowledge and their wisdom for arrogance, and it's not. Because when you are somebody who knows what you're talking about, genuinely knows what you're talking about, then A, you don't have to keep saying that you know what you're fucking talking about, right? You just say it. B, you tend to know other people who know what they're talking about because you've done your research, and so you can share resources and go, well, I don't know fully about this, but this person does, or, I saw this piece that might be interesting to you, or blah, 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 right? But here's the thing, when you know what you don't know, then you can grow. Right, and you can access more information. You can go, right, this is my weak spot over here, and over here is some knowledge. Let's bring the two together, right? Let's bring the two together. And having this awareness of our kind of frailty of our ego, right? This kind of interesting thing, right? Ego death, right? Ego death. And this is something, just I'm going to be talking about mental health here for a minute. Sometimes we go through a bit of ego death, and this is where we kind of have this ourself, if you like, the kind of construct of our ego. It gets killed off by something, it gets broken off by something, right? I've had this a few times in my life, and I think it's helpful. I think that, we forget that we don't have to be what we are right now. We can change with new information, we can be wrong and we can grow. And I think that we build up this kind of calcification, right? This sort of crust around ourselves, and that's what we are, and that's it. Whereas with ego death, you know, this was me with certain positions, right? I've built up myself in that particular position, and I've been like, well, this is who I am. This is who I am, right? And this is the challenge. It's not what I do. It's not a part of me. It's who I am, all right? And then when that thing doesn't become a thing, you lose yourself for a minute, and you go, hang on, what the fuck am I without this thing? Right? For me, long ago, it was a job, right? I put all my identity into this job. It was unhealthy, and then when the job's significance to me went away, I was like, shit, who am I? What am I without this thing? And actually, what therapy has really helped, and accessible therapy has been something that has been a challenge to find, but I finally got there with it. Therapy has given me this sense of intrinsic worth, right? That it's there inside you. And that's fascinating, because you suddenly go, oh shit, I don't need anything else to validate me. It's a process, right? And validation's nice. But you do go, well, ultimately, I am, you know, centered in a way. Right? I think that's the thing. We talk about centering a lot, don't we? But centering's, you know, gets tossed about. And what does it really mean? But I feel like I've been feeling more centered recently, in terms of like, oh, my significance, it comes from within, right? My worth is intrinsic, yeah? It's there because I'm a human being, right? And it's ultimately my opinion that all human beings have intrinsic worth. That seems to be a strange concept to some people. I don't understand how. That's on them, right? Perhaps it's from fear, actually. But anyway, the point is that within witchcraft, we perpetuate these egos, we attach ourselves to these concepts, and we lose ourselves sometimes. And it's so funny, it's so ironic that people come into witchcraft seeking this kind of sovereignty and then give it away so quickly. So for me, I think we just need to take a breath, we need to have a little moment and think, hang on, let's filter through the bullshit. Let's make sure we're protecting each other from misinformation, from scammy little fuckers, from all the sort of nonsense that occurs, and then we'll be better off for it. And more, if you can answer questions, right? If you can answer questions, going back to that coven leader, confidently, and you think, okay, cool, I've got an answer for you. Even if it takes a little bit, go, hang on, I just want to think about that a second, right? Or it's okay to say, I don't know, let me come back to you on this, right? And then come back to the person. But if you can, do that moment of like, that's a good thing, right? Yeah, I don't know how it's frustrating. That's frustrating. I do think it's a socialisation issue. I think we do get afraid of being wrong because we're punished for being wrong, right? And then we get ostracised for being wrong. Actually, being wrong is great, yeah? It's great. And it's great to correct yourself. And so, yeah. So, we've said, we've done the magical theory, right? Time to do the magical thing. Now, you're going to laugh at these, right? Okay, hang on. So it's been so long since I've been trying to do this video for bloody ages, right? And you know, you've been very patient. And honestly, I love you for it. Thank you so much. So come up with these little red flags, right? Oh, a bit of ASMR. A long time ago. So they're in a bit of a state, but I like them. So we're going to go through them, right? Well, I don't like red flags, but in fact, maybe I do, because it is a good warning sign. But anyway, the point is, these are some little red flags, right? This magical thing to do that we're going to do are some little red flags to look out for that perhaps compress what I've just said into sort of easy sort of things that you want to go, oh, makes me question a bit, right? So, here we go. Right. If the person or the authority or the practice is dismissive, right? I mean, look at the state of it. Jesus Christ. There's water all over. I think I've spilt 1,000,000 cups on these things, and I've put them in cupboards. And anyway, the point is, if the person is, or the concept is dismissive, right? Not a good sign, yeah? A person shouldn't be dismissing you if you're asking questions. They shouldn't be dismissing critique or not engaging with it. That's a red flag, right? Bye-bye, Toadie. Also, are they then in these sort of if they are having kind of any authority or position in the witchcraft community, are they doing something like encouraging pile-ons, right, of other people? Yeah, are they encouraging their followers, their readers, their whatevers to pile on to people they disagree with? Not a good sign. Are they perhaps saying, and this is a big thing that I encountered, right? When I first encountered in the witchcraft community, there was all these people saying they've got this brilliant secret, and I thought, oh, brilliant, I need to know all that I need to know, right? Because I'm seeking information, right? And they sign and say they've got some kind of big secret or miracle cure, right? I'm telling you, these people don't have a secret, right? The amount of times people say, I'm going to share a big secret with you, sign up, right? And it's free until it's like £500, right? And they go, oh, yeah. And it's like 3 emails on flipping meditation. It's an old joke I've made. I'm going to make it a million times more, because that's a million times about the times I've had those bloody emails or bloody notifications or whatever it is. Also, and this is a bit of a difficult thing, right? Because humour's humour, but specifically, if someone's mocking, right, and they're punching down, right, it's important to be able to critique, and humour's been a great tool for folks who have been in positions that are not normally powerful to take on the powerful. But if they're mocking in a way that is really kind of just not, you know, it's people who are perhaps in minorities, or it's people who might be unwell, you know. The thing is, this part of the challenge with scams and stuff like that is that there are people in our community who have differences that might be that might end up being more susceptible, right? We've got to be aware that there are different people in our community that have different needs and that might not always see these red flags, right? So if someone's mocking people who are different from them, right, whether that is different in terms of, different abilities, in terms of their, race, in terms of their gender, in terms of their orientation, anything like that, we've got to go, that's no thanks, mate, right? And so, yeah, that's not a big thing for me. Also, what company do these folks keep, right? So are they hanging out with people who are complete flipping red flags, yeah? What company are they keeping? The thing is, it's not enough for me. It's not enough for me to be like, oh, well, I don't think this, right? But I'll tolerate, I don't know, Bob, who's, and there's always Bob in it. Sorry, Bob's out there. But, I'll tolerate Bob with his blooming protest that he does against, whatever it might be, whatever social cause he thinks is going to end the world. No, I don't want to be friends with people who hang out with a Bob, right? Again, sorry, Bobs. Also, if they are saying, or they are giving you lots of if they are giving lots of random messages, right, or pestering you, yeah, and that could be that they are, because some people, unfortunately, of course, people will take advantage of folks for things like sex, for things, obviously money-wise as well. We have this with the following red flag, which is, are they saying there's some kind of spiritual threat or a message from the ancestors, right? Are they basically saying they've got some bullshit message that you need to know, and that the first couple of messages they engage with just to really psych you up, and then they suddenly go, well, to understand this message or to really get this message through, you need to pay me 20 quid, and then it becomes 30, and then it becomes £100, then it becomes £200, right? And this is not a falsehood. I know of many folks who unfortunately have been taken up by these folks because it's fear. And this is the thing, right? I have anxiety and depression, right? I'm medicated for it, and I'm also seeking therapy, right? Both helpful things. Anxiety is one of those things that fucks you over sometimes because you think, oh, well, but what if, right? And this is the fucking thing that annoys me about these egos and all this stuff, and I'm swearing a bit more in this video perhaps than normal because it annoys me so much. Because people are taking advantage, right? I used to hate those fucking... You don't see it so much these days. I think because people know how shitty it is. But you don't see those posts who come up and they go, oh, if you don't share this picture or if you don't do this thingy or whatever it is, right? Again, spiritual sort of threats, yeah? And random messages or pestering. If you don't share this, you're going to have bad luck or whatever it is, blah, blah, blah. for however many whatevers, or until you, and it's shit. And the amount of people we've seen, right, who've shared that stuff. Why? Because it's powerful. We know as witches words are powerful, right? So yeah, that pisses me off. Anyway, if you do end up with one of those stupid fucking messages on your social medias or whatever it is, just have a little look for the doggo meme, which is it's a doggo, a little dog meme where it's like infinite protection from those silly things, basically. And there you go. If you're watching this video, you have infinite protection. You have infinite protection, past, present, future, from those shitty fucking memes that go, if you don't share this, blah, blah, blah. Bullshit. The Grand Toad says bull fucking shit. 0 croaks for those folks who share that shit. So yeah. Anyway, fucking turn into a rant now. That's my ego. That's my ego coming out. But the whole thing, essentially, is just a question, right? Have a little think about these things. And if people are ticking a few of these red flags off, or waving a few of these red flags, you think, oh shit, it's time to do some boundary work and fuck off far away from them. So yeah, that's my perspective. It's, you know, it's been a hard thing doing this video because how do you talk about ego when you have one yourself? Because how do you kind of go about addressing this stuff in the community that is perhaps less comfortable to talk about? You know, I don't want to be bitching about local community leaders or local, you know, coven of folk or people in traditions online, but we have to be able to critique stuff. And again, this is that Emperor's New Clothes thing. If we're not able to critique stuff, then we have this build up and this falsehood that occurs, and it gets perpetuated. Look at gender roles within witchcraft. We're getting to that point now, right? More books like Queering a Craft, Bending the Binaries recently come out by Deborah Lipp, right? We're getting more and more, and in fact, in Deborah Lipp's book, Bending the Binary, they say, in the past, I had some shitty takes that I didn't know were shitty, and I moved on, right? And they said, look, I've been writing however many years. I'm going to have had some shit takes back then, but now I'm doing, you know, better. I'm affirming, or reaffirming. I'm reestablishing and going over, or reassessing. Goodness me, reassessing what it is that is important and true and accurate and fair, you know. And what's great is, and this is the thing about, you know, equality, people aren't taking shit away from you, mate. They are just getting what you have always had. Right? We're levelling the things out little by little. And one of the things that's been great about university, right, I'm going to bang on about university, but it's helpful for you too, because I get access to lots of interesting witchy books. Sorry, I got distracted by thinking about the books, all the witchcraft books I've got access to. Because I went to, one of the first things I did on campus was go to the library to check out what they had on witchcraft and the occult, because it was a person whose focus, one of the lecturers' focus is on witchcraft. And now there's 2, which is great. Anyway, I went to the library and there were 6 shelves. 6 shelves. You can't see my other hand. Of witchcraft books. And I was like, oh my God. Anyway, point is that having studied the small part of history that I have as part of my foundation year going into the history degree, that progress happens. It does happen. Sometimes it's painfully slow, but it does happen. I mean, look at myself. When I was younger, we didn't have gay marriage or equal marriage, and now we do. Now I can be married to my wife. Like, what the fuck? That's brilliant, right? And perhaps it shouldn't be what the fuck. Perhaps it should be why the fuck not? And, you know, equally, the choice not to marry is great, but the fact is, choice, yeah? And this is the thing, with information, we have the choice whether to take it in or not, and we also have a kind of responsibility to filter it through, a bullshit filter, right? So have a little look at critical thinking online, use those tools of the little red flags to help yourself filter out some nonsense folks, read books that are referenced, that have a good bibliography, and hang around people who are open to discuss things and are willing to be wrong. And the thing is, what's even braver than that is willing to be wrong yourself. So that's my little rant on ego, and I wish you all health and wealth.